Greetings, everyone. We would like to open this talk with an actual photographic map of the observable cosmos based on a 21-year effort released in 2022 by NASA in collaboration with several U.S. universities. With the most recent data gathered by the James Webb Telescope, estimating 2 trillion galaxies, here we are seeing but a 90-degree quadrant, only 10 degrees deep, showing 200,000 galaxies and quasars, with the perimeter arc representing the cosmic microwave background, in fact, pervading the whole. The largest known galaxy, called Alcioneu, is 16.3 million light years across, over 160 times wider, we're told, than the Milky Way. But it would appear on this map as a slightly larger blue-white dot. As awe-inspiring as all of this is, modern science has also established that the observable universe represents less than 5% of the total matter and energy existing in the cosmos. The other 95% is referred to as dark energy and dark matter. But as we know, these are just placeholders because they are forces undetectable, except in their effects, and unobservable by any current technology, and utterly unknown as to their constitution. Some of the most brilliant pioneers of both physics and neuroscience today go much further than this, offering a Copernican shift in the direction of panpsychism or panentheism, where consciousness itself, rather than matter, is recognized as the fundamental ground within which the quantum and classical universe becomes observable. And this would be a major revolution in the direction of archaic conceptions, such as those represented in the Kalachakra mandala. In the last 15 years, learned Tibet researchers have found indications that the secret book of Xian, on which the 2 volumes of the secret doctrine are based, may have been drawn from the now secret and publicly inaccessible Mula, or root Kalachakra Tantra. In the Tibetan tradition, this teaching is said to have been transmitted telepathically by the historic Buddha to the Bodhisattvas of Shambhala. Here, every being and element, every galaxy, planet, and star, as every point of visible and invisible space, is pervaded by the Buddha nature, by Maha-karuna and Prajna, the fiery, multicolored perimeter representing an all-pervading, non-dual reality of universal compassion and all-comprehending wisdom. Tibetan Buddhism is not alone in this remarkable assertion of spiritual science. Gandhi equated truth and love, satya and ahimsa, as being 2 sides of the same coin. Tolstoy, Jacob Burma, and other Christian mystics equated God and love, echoing themes found in Greek, Hindu, and Muslim traditions. The pre-Socratic Parmenides identified divine eros as the creativity of the highest and first deity. Likewise, in the oldest Hindu Vedic traditions known to humanity, the goddess Kamadeva is that which propels each dawn of being to arise from non-being and maintains the great sacrificial cosmic wheel in motion. Kama, as pre-cosmic and cosmic desire, is a primordial, universal, metaphysical conception apprehended by the Vedic seers, apparently transcending the capacity of human language to express. Both Asia, unborn, and Atma-bhu, self-existent, H.P. Blavatsky linked it to universal abstract motion, the great breath, cosmic will, cosmic electricity, and the Tibetan Fohat, quote, the first all-embracing desire for universal good, the first feeling of infinite tender compassion and mercy that arose in the consciousness of the creative one force as soon as it came into life and being as a ray from the absolute, unquote. The English word compassion is derived from the Old French and Latin, meaning to suffer with or to feel sympathy for, as from the Greek sympatheia, expressing affinity or kinship. In the trans-Himalayan conception of Theosophia, all beings are the seemingly differentiated aspects of one being, all elements ever in coordination and kinship with the one spiritual element. All the forces known to physics are the expression on our plane of perception of one universal metaphysical force, conscious, supremely intelligent, and purposeful. As the exhalation and inhalation of a great breath, divine love expresses a minute portion of itself in an endless series of manifestations, each time at a higher level, each time evolving an arena where every monadic center of consciousness can expand into wider circles of joy and realization, can achieve greater levels of awareness from semi-conscious to self-conscious intelligence and knowledge in harmony with the whole. In the Lankavatara Sutra, a key text of East Asian Buddhism, this Maha-karuna, or great compassion, is also the culmination of the highest form of enlightenment, expressing itself in the fully realized Bodhisattva as Prajnaparamita, omniscient divine wisdom. Having learned all that can be learned through reincarnation in human form, the Bodhisattva has shattered the nadanas, we're told, the causal chain which propels unconscious rebirth and personal suffering. At the same time, having consciously chosen the paramita path, the thread soul adopts the suffering of all other beings, cultivates the Sambhogakaya vesture of universal knowledge and the Nirmanakaya vesture of ceaseless service, fusing cosmic and human, spirit and matter, eternity and time, formless in essence, yet a perfected embodiment of Fohatic descent. Such beings are the most sublime and elevating ideas known to humanity. They are also living facts in nature, symbolically the holders of both Dorje and Bell, all-embracing skillful means and all-penetrating wisdom. They stand as distant galaxies, twinkling in the night sky, seemingly far beyond our present reach. Yet in truth, we are told, they are in our very midst, one with the higher triad of every being. And their example echoes itself in the daily, natural, self-sacrificing devotion of mother for child, of teacher for aspiring pupil, in the innate sense of unity and kindness that impels one person to repeatedly assist or step aside on behalf of others. Harmonic and self-sacrificial unity and altruism are also integral to the plant and animal kingdoms, as in the human physical vesture itself, where each of the 36 trillion cells sacrificially contributes and fulfills its duty to the benefit of the whole temple. In Theravada traditions of Buddhism, 550 lives as a bodhisattva led to the culminating incarnation known as Gautama Buddha of the 5th century BCE. But in the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, as in the Theosophical, a bodhisattva is higher than a Buddha on account of the immense sacrifice. In this view, the historically known Shakyamuni is depicted as only one of countless incarnations of Amitabha, a prototypical hierarchy, meaning the boundless age of infinite light. enlightened in a far distant period of evolution, yet renouncing the rest, selfish bliss, and isolation in lesser tiers of nirvana, such beings willingly, consciously, and repeatedly take birth in order to remove the suffering of others, to maintain and reestablish the Dharma and the Sangha, to preserve and articulate divinely instructed teachings of critical value to devas, men, and gods. The cycle of rebirth and upward arc of human evolution is, in fact, a life or death struggle. Just as without the nurturing protection and watchful guidance of the parent, the child would perish, so too without the aid of these Buddhas of compassion, masters and guardians, the human family would be lost. A passage from the Maha-prajnaparamita, chapter 14. The omniscient one exists. Why? Because he has attained the 10 powers of a bodhisattva. He knows what is possible and what is impossible. He knows the causes and conditions and the karmic retribution of actions. He knows the samadhis and the deliverances. He knows the good or bad faculties of beings. He knows the various kinds of deliverances from desire. He knows the innumerable lineages of all the types of universes. He knows all the abodes and their paths. He knows the conduct and the thoughts of beings in their previous existences. He has acquired the discrimination of the divine eye. He knows the cessation of all the impurities. He distinguishes clearly between the good and bad. He preaches a supreme doctrine in all the universes. He has acquired the taste of ambrosia. He has found the middle way. He knows the true nature of all conditioned or unconditioned dharmas. He has rejected forever all desire of the 3 realms. It is for these reasons that the Buddha is omniscient. As illustrated on page 300 of Volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine, most of current humanity has passed the midpoint of the 5th subrace of the 5th root race. This means the 5th principle of a benevolent and pellucid form of mentality, linking intellect and intuition, soul wisdom with altruistic action, should be emerging. However, due to our misidentification with the vestures of incarnation rather than the universal spirit of unity, we have misused our faculties for selfish purposes. Through a long series of tragic violations of the law of karma in the 4th root race, the innate faculty of pristine and compassionate spiritual insight, called the eye of Dhamma, closed. The result is many human beings alive today are spiritually blind. Their capacity for calm, continuity of purpose, for concentrated ideation upon spiritual themes and principles, and the right use of creative imagination are almost dormant. The glossy worldly wisdom cherished by a dying materialistic culture is in fact its opposite, a barbaric and violent downward course. Behind the cacophony, behind eyes that proudly scoff, we are told, there is a desperate need and thirst for spiritual healing and self-transformation. HPB explained that this same teaching of human race evolution is symbolized by the 11 heads of Avalokiteshvara, the Dhyani Bodhisattva synthesizing the wisdom and compassion of all Buddhas. The demonic head of the 4th tier symbolizes Atlantean self-interest. It is the demon of animalistic appetites, we're told, of personal devilish egotism, selfishness, and self-interest, which fosters dogmatism, anthropomorphic religion, sectarianism, division, and discord, all of which further increases our blindness, our inhumanity to one another and to nature, and our propensity towards self-destruction. It also deafens us to true spiritual teachings and its teachers. Thus, our current karmic condition is seen as one deeply rooted in a long series of choices we have made in past lives, epochs, and races. In many such depictions, the crown of the fourth root race head covers the mouth of the fifth root race, symbolically perhaps preventing the utterance of the healing sound of Maitreya, also called the fifth Buddha of our current Kalpa. In the 3 years before her passing, H.P. Blavatsky wrote several journal articles that are among the most forceful moral indictments of modern civilization she ever penned, while also pointing to what she meant by the moment of choice facing humanity. In the tragic and turbid waters of the first decades of the 21st century, her words are prophetic. Witnessing the emerging economic growth of the second industrial revolution, which included the first steam engines, continental railroads, and electrical grids, she wrote, quote, "All the progress and glittering innovations of modern civilization are skin deep, and due to selfishness and materialism, the greatest curses of all nations. Materialism and indifference to all save the selfish realization of wealth and power, and the overfeeding of national and personal vanity have gradually led nations and men to an almost entire oblivion of spiritual ideals, of the love of nature, to the correct appreciation of things." She called modern civilization a hideous leprosy, canting, deceitful, hypocritical, and vain, from its diplomats down to its custodians of religion, from its political down to its social laws, greedy and brutal beyond expression in its grabbing characteristics. The virus of insatiable ambition and consumption was rapidly eating its way through all quarters of the globe and hardening the human heart. Long before the nearly global and wanton extraction and profligate reliance upon fossil fuels, she observed, climates are changing, and the face of the whole world will soon be altered. She pointed to the destruction of primeval forests and of animal species as another vivid display of the murderous hand of the pioneers of civilization, and how the violent mistreatment of minority populations, women, and children was becoming the accepted, legalized norm. Social immorality of every kind is as rife as ever, she wrote, and especially among so-called religious nations and governments, the most hateful discrimination and horrible crimes are daily perpetrated, while the genuine religious spirit is regarded as a form of insanity. At the same time, on the eve of 2 world wars, she boldly explained, "We are now facing all the glorious possibilities of the future. Once again, the hour has struck for the great periodical return of the rising tide of mystic thought. We are surrounded on all sides by the ocean of universal science, the science of life eternal, bringing in its waters the buried and long forgotten treasures of vanished generations, treasures still unknown to the modern civilized races. Now is the time for action by all who see the sterility and foolishness of an existence blinded by materialism and so ferociously indifferent to the fate of others. It is for them to devote their best energies, all their courage, and all their efforts to bring about an intellectual reform. This reform cannot be accomplished except through theosophy, and let us say it, occultism, or the wisdom of the East. It is not materialism that will have the upper hand." In other words, the masters who initiated the theosophical movement long ago knew exactly where we would be at this juncture. They foresaw how, even amidst the darkness, the nascent golden age of the 6th root race was being gestated. Centers of universal brotherhood, wholly focused on the service of humanity, could arise. On behalf of this and future civilizations, fresh expressions of the eternal wisdom religion, also called the Gupta Vidya, the secret wisdom science, parts of which had been kept hidden for millennia, were rendered for the first time in the English language. Why? HPB reiterated again and again. The gradual assimilation by mankind of great spiritual truths will alone revolutionize the face of civilization and ultimately result in a far more effective panacea for evil than the mere tinkering of superficial misery. Prevention is better than cure. As Professor Hall has outlined for us this morning, in the theosophical conception, metaphysics and ethics are the root system, trunk, and canopy of one and the same tree. One without the other is incomplete. The secret doctrine is the primary resource outlining a profound metaphysical root system, while the voice of the silence offers a few fragments and a poetic rendition of the practical ethics, the visible trunk and branches, the creative and nourishing flowers and fruit. In her preface to the voice and in the introduction to the SD, both, HPB affirms that they were derived from the same series of texts. While refusing to give many specific details of her travels and experiences, it is clear HPB had the thrice honored access to these otherwise esoteric teachings via the hidden libraries and verbal instruction of the living fraternity of perfected adepts in the groves and hamlets of Shambhala. Professor Hall also pointed to a third element linking metaphysics and ethics, the internal sap of epistemology. The key epistemological method of Theosophia is study and meditation. In the voice of the silence and in the classical traditions of Buddhist thought, this triad of metaphysics, ethics, and meditation is also known as the three perfections in traditional Sanskrit terms, Prajna, Shila, and Samadhi. Oceanic and ineffable in its depths, yet gentle enough at its shores for the beginner to approach. It is the triune summation of the path of altruism open to all human beings of whatever culture, station, status, or external condition. In the Aquarian Age, as exemplified by M.K. Gandhi, devotion to spiritual ideals re-enters the so-called secular world, no longer retreating to quiet forests or mountain caves of monastic isolation. Like the Hindu Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti yogas, the three perfections are a three-in-one, an equilateral triangle with the ceaseless practice of compassion as their center point. In Buddhist psychology, they are the antidotes to the three poisons, the three root kleshas, generating all suffering and afflictive states of emotion, mind, and heart. The poisons are symbolized by the pig, the bird, and the snake at the center of the Bhava Chakra, the wheel of rebirth and suffering, found painted on the entrance walls of many a Tibetan temple. Avidya, or ignorance, raga, or attachment, and dvesha, hatred. When the antidotes are properly and continuously applied, Bhava Chakra transforms into Dharma Chakra. The wheel of samsara becomes the wheel of duty and spiritual service to race and kin, to friend and foe. One becomes capable of entering any realm where beings are trapped or lost, like a swan descending upon a mountain lake, able to point the way to the removal of suffering. The three perfections are also a traditional abbreviation of the 6 or 10 paramitas, the transcendent excellences identified by scholars to have first emerged in the exoteric Prajnaparamita texts of Northern Buddhism in the 2nd century of the Common Era. However, as we shall see in the coming days, in the esoteric system of Theosophia, which includes pre-Buddhistic teachings, instead of 6, there are 7 or 10 paramitas, described as golden gates or portals, through which the aspirant must pass. Vairaga, or indifference to pleasure and pain, truth alone perceived, is the added excellence given as the pivotal 4th. The student of Theosophy knows that 7 is a root qualitative subdivision of mystic nature. It corresponds with countless other subdivisions by 7 found in many traditions. The first 7 stanzas given in the Secret Doctrine, for example, are spoken of as an algebraic formula applicable at every scale, from the entire cosmos to our tiny globe, from an entire period of manifestation to a single human life, from the 7 dhyanis to the ephemeral snowflake and the close packing of spheres. Prior to the translation of The Voice of the Silence into English, the idea of a bodhisattva and the paramita path were virtually unknown in the West. The voice describes the path from multiple perspectives composed of 3 fragments titled, number 1, The Voice of the Silence, number 2, The 2 Paths, and number 3, The 7 Portals. Each of these fragments will be taken up in succession over the coming 3 days. Remember, however, that these are only 3 out of 90 such treatises, 39 of which HPB had memorized as part of her training. Even without knowing the definitions of all the words or the many layers of deeper meaning behind each passage, her poetic rendition speaks deeply to the intuition. We know of one student, for example, who first found the voice at the age of 16 at the bottom of a box of used books purchased at a raffle. Without any knowledge of Theosophy or of Sanskrit, upon reading it for the first time, she knew its priceless worth. To this day, she is one of the most devoted and insightful students of Theosophy we have had the privilege of knowing. In the Gupta Vidya, the Dhyani Buddhas are 7-fold, an emanation of the triune logos, heralding the dawn of every cosmos as every planetary system of evolution. As one of the greatest mysteries of Theosophia, they are described as agents of the universal divine mind, who watch over, build, and descend through hierarchies of beings in order to become cosmic law, the 7 kingdoms, as well as the 7 principles of human and cosmic nature. They also repeatedly incarnate into critical junctures of history in perfect harmony with the zodiacal wheel. According to HPB, the dhyani known as Amitabha, animated Gautama Buddha, incarnated at least 24 times in the 5th root race alone, and also manifested through Shankaracharya in the 2nd and Tsongkhapa in the 14th century. Adi Shankara is regarded as the foremost expounder of non-dual, non-ritualistic Advaita Vedanta, the author of many classic sacred texts such as the Crest Jewel of Wisdom and Atma Bodha. In her numerous articles collected under the title The Mystery of the Buddha, HPB states that the incarnation known as Shankara arrived to undo the errors of the historic Buddha. In his zeal to make the guarded teaching of the Brahmin priests available to the masses, Gautama inadvertently gave rise to the nihilism still found in some schools of Buddhist practice. It was in 1357 that the ray of Amitabha, known as the adept teacher Tsongkhapa, appeared in Amdo, Tibet. At the age of 3, he took Buddhist layman's vows. At the age of 7, took those of a novitiate monk. By 17, he was a proficient doctor of medicine. By 19, Tsongkhapa was renowned as a scholar, debater, and dialectician. By 32, he began to write, and in his 40s is said to have performed initiations in the cave temples on the Patala Hill in Lhasa. said to consult Manjushri at will, the Dhyani Bodhisattva of perfected wisdom. Among Tsongkhapa's voluminous writings were the Lamrim instructions, a great exposition on the stages of the path. To purify, preserve, and promulgate the wisdom religion, he founded the Gelugpa order, the third Dalai Lama of which was recognized as a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, also known as Padmapani and Chenrezig in Tibetan, as well as Kuan Yin in Chinese Buddhism. Tsongkhapa initiated a 7th century plan in order to prepare the world for mental and spiritual revitalization via Theosophia. In the secret doctrine, formless enlightened centers of consciousness manifesting through the dhyanis and repeatedly incarnating in our earth chain are referred to as the ever-living human banyan and the great sacrifice. Quote, all the world saviors, the bodhisattvas and the avatars, are the trees of salvation grown out from the one seed or bija, whether it be called Adi-Buddha or Mahavishnu. Adi-Buddha is the name given to the central figure of the Kalachakra, quote, awake since beginningless time, unquote. Also called the great initiator in the secret doctrine, nameless, though known by many names in different traditions. It is both a pinnacle of transcendent, enlightened, salvific consciousness and a society of sages, a singular brotherhood of bodhisattvas, adepts, kumaras, manus, and avatars, jivanmuktas, and nirmanakayas of various grades. Called Tirthankaras in the Jain tradition, Christos in the Gnostic, heroes of goodness and light in the Pythagorean verses, they are all known to one another and all working in perfect harmony. While also speaking of the ineffable grandeur of greater and lesser avatars and nirmanakayas, in the secret doctrine, HPB equates them with Mahatmas. These personages may just as well be called rishis or avatars, etc., as they are great Mahatmas or Buddhas and are universal and common property. They are historical sages, at any rate. For all the occultists who believe in such a hierarchy of sages, the existence of which has been proved to them by the learned ones of the fraternity. In the last pages of the Key to Theosophy, HPB pointed to the special effort made by the Mahatmas in the last 25 years of each century. W.Q. Judge repeatedly reprinted her prophecy. The outpouring that occurred in the last quarter of the 20th century, the seventh impulsion of that initiated by Tsongkhapa, is evident to one who cares to discover it. Emerging since 1975, we find a magnificent restatement, confirmation, and elaboration of the architectonics and metapsychological application of the 1875 transmission, including not only portions of the previously esoteric dimensions of Buddhism, but of many of the world's great traditions. In the centenary edition of The Voice of the Silence, issued in 1989, for example, we find a foreword by the 14th Dalai Lama and a dedication by the 9th Panchen Lama gracing the opening pages. And of the many Buddhist texts now available, which Raghavan Iyer pointed to as supplements to the Voice, we have Shantideva's The Way of the Bodhisattva, the seminal poem of the 8th century Buddhist master of Nalanda, first translated into English in the 1980s. 6 chapters on the paramitas are preceded by the vow of Bodhichitta. In blessing one translation of this text, the Dalai Lama placed it on his head and declared that if he knew anything about compassion, it was from Shantideva that he learned it. At the core of the Maha-prajnaparamita sutras attributed to Nagarjuna, 10 paramitas are listed. Students of the SD have sought to uncover correlations with the tenfold cosmos given in Kabbalistic teaching, the Pythagorean decad, and the page 200 diagram of the SD. Without going into the fascinating details, we will close this introductory presentation by mentioning the eighth paramita, which some may not be familiar with. It is called Pranidhana, a Sanskrit word meaning to surrender, devote, or vow. The 10 pranidhanas, or the 10 great vows of a bodhisattva, can be condensed into a single one, the vow of bodhicitta, the altruistic commitment to seek enlightenment on behalf of all suffering sentient beings. In this great poem, Shantideva rejoices in the first glimmer, the first awakening of bodhicitta in the heart center, which he likens to finding, quote, a jewel in a heap of dust, and a rediscovery of the alchemical immortality of our true spiritual ancestry. In chapter 2, Shantideva extols the excellence and priceless worth of bodhicitta and honors those bodhisattvas, past and present, quote, the perfect leaders of all migrant beings who constantly bestow on boundless multitudes their own peerless joy, unquote. He mentally evokes all the most precious and pure things the world has in it and offers it to them in gratitude without reserve. He then confesses his own blindness, ignorance, and wickedness, the evils he has amassed and sins committed through many lives in which he acted against the triple gem, against the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, against his parents, teachers, and the rest, through the force of his defilements of body, speech, and mind. This confession, however, is no cry for forgiveness, but a willing acknowledgement of error in the presence of those who see all, whose comprehension and compassion is unbounded, who equally know the karmic causes generated, as well as the authenticity and purity of the commitment he now fearlessly proposes to embrace. Just as he had offered all naturally occurring precious treasures, so does he now confess to all the sins that humankind is heir to. This is all a kind of prelude to chapter 3, titled Commitment, where Shantideva describes what he means to do by serving the Buddhas in order to become himself a source of refuge and of endless dana, or generosity, the first paramita. And through these actions now performed, by all the virtue I have just amassed, may all the pain of every living being be wholly scattered and destroyed. For all those ailing in the world, until their every sickness has been healed, may I myself become for them the doctor, nurse, the medicine itself. Raining down a flood of food and drink, may I dispel the ills of thirst and famine. May I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those who journey on the road. For those who wish to go across the water, may I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May I be the wishing jewel, the vase of plenty, a word of power, and the supreme healing. These evocative verses are then followed by those which over many centuries now have been recited by countless Buddhist monks, nuns, and laypersons who formerly wish to commit themselves to the Bodhisattva path. But, as the Dalai Lama says, they can be recited, taken to heart, and vowed by any person, regardless of the tradition they follow. And in his commentary, he states that in preparation for reciting them, one should visualize all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, present, and to come, not only the great teachers of one's own tradition, but also those of all other traditions. One should also imagine, he says, all sentient beings, past, currently living, and future, as present in one's field of vision and capable of hearing one's voice. To this entire assembly, one should commit oneself. Just as all the Buddhas of the past embraced the awakened attitude of mind and in the precepts of the Bodhisattvas step-by-step abode and trained, just so, and for the benefit of beings, I will also have this attitude of mind. And in those precepts, step by step, I will abide and train myself. The need for such a vow is repeated in the voice of the silence. Quote, to live to benefit mankind is the first step, unquote. And it is exactly such a vow, we're told, kept intact through many lives, through horrific trials, egoic deaths and rebirths, that eventually transmutes lower desires into higher ones, that surrenders the personal and activates the unconditional spiritual will. It is also said to be that crucial factor which propels the aspirant, even at the highest tiers of Samadhi, to turn away from the isolated bliss of illusory nirvanic states and choose the Nirmanakaya robe in order to remain accessible to all sentient beings to serve and to aid. In the first fragment of the voice, the stages of ascent are given as a ladder of mystic sounds by which one hears the voice of the inner God in 7 manners. Here we find a teaching that links the path of hearing as taught by the Buddha in the Suringama Sutra with the music of the spheres of Pythagoras, the flute of Krishna, the fourfold Vak of Hinduism, and the path of the word found in St. John's Gospel. Levels of Akashic sound, color, number, and meaning, which are inaudible and visible to the physical senses, become fully perceptible to the immortal triad of every human being through the paramita path and the grace of the Guru. The individual heart re-becomes the cosmic heart, rejoining in conscious union with the entire brotherhood of bodhisattvas. Through this ascent, there is a progressive fusion of the ethical and metaphysical teaching of masters, the cries of humanity, and the voice of conscience at ever deeper levels of consciousness, substance, and energy, wherein the inner dhyani, the logoic voice of Bodhichitta, becomes compassion absolute, the 7th sound, which swallows all the others. Behold, thou hast become the light. Thou hast become the sound. Thou art thy master and thy God. Thou art thyself, the object of thy search, the voice unbroken, which resounds throughout eternities, exempt from change, from sin exempt, the 7 sounds in one, the voice of the silence. Om Tat Sat. May all the good that arises from this conference be offered for the benefit of sentient beings. Thank you.